She thought desire was a thing she had buried long ago, until an unexpected visitor arrived, and the life she had so carefully built began to crumble. Stay with us and discover the secrets, the silences, and the desires that surround this intense story in today's episode of Forbidden Tales. My name is Lucia. I am 64 years old, and I live alone in a stone house perched on the cliffs of Portugal's Atlantic coast. Here, the constant sound of waves breaking against the rocks is the soundtrack to my life. Since my husband passed away 12 years ago, this place has become my refuge, a sanctuary where time seems to have stood still. My days are simple and silent. I tend to a garden of wildflowers. I bake fresh bread every morning, and I spend my evenings reading by the fireside. The solitude has never bothered me. It was a choice. At least, I believed it was enough. Until an unexpected message shattered my routine. It was from my nephew André, my older sister Isabel's son. André, at 28, lives in Lisbon, a life that is hectic, modern, always in motion. I had always admired him for his vibrant energy, his natural charisma, his ambition. But in that message, there was something different, an introspective tone that caught me by surprise. Aunt Lucia, may I spend the weekend with you? I need to disconnect for a bit. I was surprised. My house, so far removed from the urban rush he seemed to love, wasn't the kind of destination I imagined he would choose. But I didn't hesitate. Of course, Andre, this house is your house. In the days that followed, I lovingly prepared the guest room. I opened the windows to let the sea breeze circulate and placed a small branch of fresh lavender on the nightstand. I felt a mixture of anticipation and curiosity. What could possibly be bringing him here? On Friday, just before sunset, I heard the sound of a car on the gravel road. My heart sped up, just slightly. I smoothed down my light, flowing gray linen dress and went to the door. There he was, tall, his brown hair tousled by the wind, and a smile that lit up his face. He wore a gray t-shirt that highlighted his athletic build and carried a simple backpack over one shoulder. But what caught my attention most were his eyes. They were tired, as if they carried an invisible weight. Aunt Lucia, it's so good to see you, he said, pulling me into a tight hug. The pleasure is all mine, Andre, I replied, noticing a subtle sadness in his gaze, something he was trying to hide. During dinner that night, I noticed he was quieter than usual. Despite a few occasional jokes, a shadow lingered in his expression. Is everything all right? I asked, pouring him a little more wine. He hesitated for a second, as if he had something to say, but then just murmured, Lisbon is exhausting. I just needed some peace. I didn't press him. Later, as I was washing the dishes, and he remained at the table, his head in his hands, I felt a tightness in my chest. There was something more going on. The next morning, the first rays of sunlight flooded the living room. I was wearing a light blue dress and had just prepared the coffee. As I entered the room, I saw Andre was already awake, sitting on the sofa with a book of poetry in his hands, one of the ones I leave on the coffee table. I didn't know you liked poetry, I commented, handing him a cup. He smiled shyly. Maybe I'm just starting to discover it now. His tone suggested something deeper, as if he were undergoing an internal transformation. In the afternoon, We walked together along the cliffs. The wind whipped through our hair as he spoke about his work and life in the city. But even in his most animated moments, his voice carried a certain melancholy. At one point, he stopped and looked me in the eyes. Auntie, sometimes I feel like I'm not living the life I was meant to. His words took me by surprise. He had always seemed so certain of himself. Sometimes, I replied, we need to step away to understand what truly matters. He nodded in silence, but his gaze said more than words ever could. That night, after dinner, we sat together on the sofa, covered by a blanket. André moved closer than usual, and when our eyes met, something shifted. An unexpected spark seemed to ignite between us. Thank you for having me, he said, his voice soft. This place, it's good for me. You are always welcome here, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. But my heart was racing. There was an intensity in his gaze that was awakening emotions I believed had long been dormant. The next morning, I woke up early and decided to prepare a special breakfast. I put on a green linen dress, embroidered with small details on the sleeves. As I arranged the toast on the table, I heard Andre's footsteps on the stairs. He entered the kitchen, his eyes still a little sleepy, and sat down. He watched my every move. You always make everything seem so special, he commented, with a sincerity that caught me off guard. I blushed. It was hard to ignore the effect his words had on me. Later, we went out to the garden. He helped me move some large pots, laughing when he almost dropped one. You have a good eye for flowers, he praised, looking at my rose bushes. I find peace here, I replied. It's the only place where I feel I can be who I really am. He looked at me with an intensity that made me avert my eyes. You are incredible, Aunt Lucia. The world should see that. A lump formed in my throat. His words resonated within me for longer than I cared to admit. In the afternoon, the heat drove us back inside. I changed into a light white linen dress and sat in an armchair near the window. André put on a playlist of soft music, creating an almost magical atmosphere. He sat on the sofa, closer than usual. The silence between us was dense, heavy with meaning. It feels like another world here, he said in a low voice. Everything here is more real. His hand brushed against mine, a light touch, but it made my heart leap. Thank you for letting me stay, he murmured with a warm smile. I just smiled back, feeling the growing tension that I was pretending not to notice. After dinner, I took a bath with lavender oil, trying to calm my thoughts. But Andre's presence was in every corner of the house, in every gesture, every look. As I was brushing my hair, I heard a soft knock on the door. Aunt Lucia, can I talk to you? It was Andre. I opened the door, still in my cotton robe. He stood on the threshold, looking hesitant. I just wanted to thank you, really. This place was exactly what I needed. You don't have to thank me, my dear, I replied, trying to sound calm. He said nothing more and returned to his room. I closed the door, but my mind was in a whirlwind. The next day, I decided to go to the local market. I needed space to sort out my thoughts. I put on a light red dress and left with a heavy heart. When I returned, I found Andre watering the garden. He turned, smiled, and said, That dress looks beautiful on you. I tried to laugh, but his intense gaze unsettled me. Something was changing, and I could no longer pretend I didn't see it. As I was preparing lunch, André came into the kitchen, holding lemons he had just picked from the garden. The sunlight streaming through the window highlighted every feature of his face. "You're so calm," he commented, leaning against the counter. "It seems like nothing ever phases you." "Practice makes perfect," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. When our hands touched, as we both reached for a plate, time seemed to stand still. Our eyes met, and there was something different there, a mixture of curiosity, affection, and something more, something we dared not name. "Sorry," he murmured, but he didn't sound sorry at all. My heart hammered in my chest. After lunch, I went to read in the garden, sitting under an olive tree. André appeared a short while later, sweaty from gardening, his t-shirt clinging to his body. "Can I stay here with you?" he asked. "Of course. This garden is ours," I replied. He sat down near me, and although the silence was comfortable, a tension hung in the air. "Sometimes I think about everything I've given up just to please other people," he said, with a rare vulnerability. I placed my hand on his. "You're still young, André. You still have time to change your path." He interlaced his fingers with mine. The gesture felt so natural that my heart quickened. "With you, everything feels lighter," he whispered. At dusk, we went for a walk on the beach. I wore a blue linen dress, he an unbuttoned shirt. The cool water lapped at our feet. "This place is magical," he said, with a serene smile. "It's my refuge," I answered. He took my hand. "Lúcia," he said, the word aunt gone from his lips. "Being here with you, it has changed everything for me." I felt a tremor inside me. I couldn't respond. I just stared at the sea, trying to understand what I was feeling. That night on the sofa, his arm brushed against mine. "Have you ever felt that something is inevitable?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't answer. His hand found mine, and for a moment, the world disappeared. The atmosphere in the house changed after that. Every gesture, every glance, seemed to carry a weight that hadn't existed before. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, but my heart knew the truth. That night, after dinner, I put on a beige dress with thin straps and went to the kitchen to wash the dishes. The sounds of the house were soft, but inside, I was in turmoil. I heard footsteps. André appeared in the doorway, watching me in silence. His eyes were heavy with something I couldn't name. "I couldn't sleep," he said, his voice low. "Would you like some tea?" I asked, trying to ease the tension. "No, I just wanted to see you." Those words hung in the air, dangerous. "André, you should rest." He took a step forward. "Lúcia, since I arrived, everything has changed. You've changed me. I've changed." "This isn't right," I murmured. "Why not? Why deny what is happening between us?" His hand brushed mine, a light yet intentional touch. I didn't pull away. We stood there in silence, until he finally returned to his room. I, however, knew that night had sealed something between us. I couldn't sleep. I sat on the sofa with a blanket, trying to clear my head. A short time later, André appeared again. He sat down beside me without a word. "Are you all right?" he asked. I didn't have the courage to be honest, but I knew this couldn't continue. "This can't happen," I said, unable to look him in the eye. He looked at me with a mixture of hurt and confusion. "What I feel for you is real. It's not an impulse, not a game. It just happened. His words shook everything I had tried to keep under control. He held my hand firmly. I'm not asking you to decide anything now. I just want you to know that I'm here. In the following days, we maintained a semblance of normalcy. Breakfast on the veranda, afternoons in the garden, evenings with books and tea. But inside, everything had changed. Every shared glance was a reminder of what was growing between us. One morning, I put on a cream-colored dress and went to water the flowers. I was focused on the pots when I heard André approach. Can I help? He asked, with that smile that disarmed any defense. We tended to the plants together. His calm gestures contrasted with the turmoil inside me. Have you ever felt like you're living a life that isn't yours? He asked suddenly. Yes, I answered honestly, many times. But I learned to accept it. I don't want to accept it, just because it's what's expected of me. He countered, moving closer. Being with you makes me feel like the rest of it doesn't matter. His hand touched mine, and this time, I did not pull away. That evening, I was sitting on the sofa with a book in my hands. André appeared with a mug. I made you some tea. I thought it might do you some good. He sat down beside me. The silence was thick, as if the air was charged with something about to happen. I can't pretend anymore, he said firmly. What I feel for you is real. His eyes searched mine, and before I could answer, he leaned in and kissed me. It was a soft kiss, yet it was filled with a world of restrained emotion. When we pulled apart, he murmured, I'm sorry. I just, I needed that. The next morning, André was in the garden as if nothing had happened. Good morning, he said with a calm smile. I replied, trying to sound natural, but we both knew that everything had changed. During breakfast, he finally broke the silence. Lucia, we can't keep pretending. It's complicated, André, I replied, my voice failing. He took my hands firmly in his. Don't be afraid. I am here. On the last afternoon of his visit, we walked along the cliffs again. I wore a white dress, and the sea shone under the sun, just as it had the first time. I want you to be honest, he said. Do you feel the same? I paused for a moment, looking at the horizon. I have spent my entire life doing what was right. Now, with you, I feel something I can no longer ignore. He smiled, a tender, knowing smile. As dusk fell, we sat in the garden with glasses of wine. He wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. You are not alone, he whispered. Suddenly, the sound of a car breaking the silence made us both look up. It was Isabel, my sister. She got out of the car with a serious, almost harsh expression. What is going on here? She demanded, her eyes darting from me to André. André, his voice firm, took my hand. Aunt Isabel, he said, what I feel for Lucia is real. She stared at us in shock. Lucia, how could you? The ground seemed to open up beneath my feet. But even in that agonizing moment, I knew this story was far from over. The silence that followed Isabel's question was a cold wave, cutting through the warm late afternoon. Her gaze shifted between me and André, desperate to comprehend what was happening. You're confused, Lucia, she said, her voice thick with emotion. He's your nephew. This isn't right. Isabel, none of this was planned, I tried to explain. But life doesn't always go the way we expect. She shook her head, visibly shaken. I need to get out of here. Without another word, she got into her car and drove away, leaving a cloud of dust and unanswered questions in her wake. We stood there for several long minutes, saying nothing. The sky began to darken, and a cool breeze blew in from the sea. "She'll need time," Andre said calmly. "So will I admitted. He nodded, respecting my silence. That night, we ate dinner without a word. Every movement, every bite, was heavy with something we couldn't name. Later, I sat by the fireplace with a shawl over my shoulders. Andre approached slowly. "Do you want me to leave tomorrow?" he asked. "I don't know what I want, Andre," I replied. "I just know that nothing will ever be the same." "That's enough for me," he said, "because even if everything changes, what I felt here, it's already been worth it." His words touched me deeply. We knew there were difficult decisions ahead, but we also knew that something true had happened between us. The next morning, the sky was overcast, and the wind from the sea blew stronger. It was the day of his departure. Andre packed his things while I prepared a simple breakfast. The atmosphere was heavy, as if the very walls of the house sensed the end of something special. When he came into the kitchen, we exchanged restrained smiles. "I don't want to say goodbye," he confessed. "Then don't," I murmured, trying to hold back my tears. "Just say, 'See you later.'" He held me in a tight, lingering hug. Then, with one last, intense look, he walked out the door. I stood there for a long time, listening to the sound of his engine fade into the distance. The following days were strange. The house felt bigger, yet empty. Routine returned, but something inside me had changed. I spent more time in the garden, writing in a notebook I had rarely used before. I began to record not just events, but the confusing, intense, and contradictory feelings that swirled within me. I received a message from Isabel. It was short and to the point. "We need to talk." I took a deep breath before replying. "Yes, whenever you're ready." I knew the reunion would be difficult, but it was also inevitable and perhaps necessary. A few days later, Isabel arrived. She entered without a smile, but also without the harshness from before. She sat with me on the porch. The sea, as always, roared in the background. "I'm still trying to understand," she said. "So am I." We sat in silence for a while. Then she sighed. "I'm not here to judge. I'm just worried." "I understand, and I appreciate you being here, despite everything." She looked out at the horizon, then back at me. "You're my sister, and I love you. I just need time to accept this." I nodded. It was more than I could have hoped for at that moment. The days that followed felt lighter. Andre and I exchanged a few messages. Nothing deep, just enough to maintain a thread of connection. One afternoon, an envelope with familiar handwriting arrived. It was a letter from him. "Lúcia, even from far away, you are with me. Every flower I see, every wind that blows from the sea, reminds me of the time we shared. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that if it's with you, I want to find out. With love, Andre." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting his words sink in. I smiled. There was still so much to resolve, so many bridges to rebuild. But deep down, I knew that something true had blossomed in that time between the cliffs, the books, and the silences. And sometimes, that's all that matters. Thank you for following this story to the end. If this narrative touched you in any way, subscribe to the Forbidden Tales channel so you don't miss the next intense, sensitive, and unexpected stories like this one. Your presence and support make all the difference. Until the next tale.